If Machiavelli were alive today, you wouldn't see him. You wouldn't hear his voice on podcasts. You wouldn't find his face in viral videos. He would be behind the curtain, where true power resides. He would be a strategic absence, not a household name. Because the man who understands the human soul doesn't expose himself to its judgment. He manipulates it, and he does it in silence, calculated silence, sharp as a blade, and yet completely unnoticed by most. Imagine a world where everything is noise, a world where everyone competes for attention, where every gesture needs applause, where every sentence is measured by likes and reactions. In such a world, Niccolò Machiavelli would not fight for visibility. He would choose invisibility as his weapon, and that is why he would win. He would know that in the age of hyperexposure, the greatest luxury is anonymity, and that anonymity, when voluntary, is synonymous with absolute control. At first, he would be forgotten, underestimated, ignored, and that is exactly what he would want. Because only when the enemy feels secure does he become vulnerable. Only when people believe you are irrelevant do they let their guard down. And that is where dominance begins. The game begins with omission, not with display. Machiavelli would not rush to position himself. He would wait for everyone to take their places on the board, and then he would move his pieces without anyone noticing. Machiavelli, if he were here, would not worry about proving himself brilliant. He would let you think otherwise. He would walk among men as if he were one of them, but without ever belonging. His gaze would not seek validation, but flaws. He would study your vanities, your impulses, your fears. He would listen more than he would speak, and his every silence would be a carefully constructed trap. All the while, he would plant false expectations and reap genuine control. We live in an age where the desire to be noticed has become a psychological necessity, where anonymity is scarier than failure, where absence is mistaken for weakness. But Machiavelli would understand something that most have forgotten. Power does not need to be seen to be felt. It is not noise, it is influence. And influence, when done well, is like destiny. It shapes the choices of others without having to shout. It changes directions without leaving a trace. That is why he would teach you the first lesson, a lesson that goes against everything you have learned. Let yourself be underestimated. Do not correct yourself. Do not prove yourself. Do not explain yourself. Accept that you are misread, because every misreading reveals more about the reader than about you. When they expect little from you, everything you do surprises them, and surprise, when well managed, turns into respect, and respect turns into fear, and fear is the raw material of obedience, and blind obedience is the fertile soil of domination. Today, everyone wants to look big, to show strength, to show intelligence. Every feed has become a stage, every image an attempt at emotional supremacy. But Machiavelli would not step onto that stage. He would dismantle the scenery behind the scenes, because real control is not in being applauded. It is in writing other people's lines. He would not be an actor. He would be a playwright. He would not react to the spotlight. He would redefine the angle of the light. And here comes a question that you need to face. How many times have you revealed too much for fear of being forgotten? How many times have you rushed to explain yourself, defend yourself, show off, just to make sure the world knows who you are? And deep down, how many of those times have you felt even more empty afterwards? Have you ever wondered why talking so much rarely brings peace? Why does the rush to be understood almost always end in misunderstandings? Machiavelli would bet on this. Void. He would plant a seed in it, a silence, and he would watch how you try to fill it, because the void is unbearable for those who do not know what to do with their own presence, and he who dominates silence dominates the other. Silence generates anxiety. Anxiety generates projection, and he who controls what the other projects controls the narrative. It is not magic, it is psychology, pure and refined. He wouldn't seek applause, he would seek loopholes. And one of the biggest loopholes is vanity, the need to be the most admired in the room, the most respected, the most brilliant. That's why he would enter silently, sit in the back and let everyone speak. One by one, they would reveal too much. They would try to impress him without knowing that they were exposing themselves. And when the room was already contaminated by arrogance, he would speak, quietly, directly, unexpectedly. One sentence, maybe two, and everything would change. Because the unexpected breaks down defenses. The surgical word hurts more than 1,000 arguments. Because what is said without needing to be said gains a weight that ordinary words do not have. And that is the secret of true power, not to convince, but to make others convince themselves that you are right. And they will do this out of pride, out of fear, or out of a need for meaning. You do not impose, you suggest. And the suggestion, when well placed, becomes an inner conviction. While everyone shows their credentials, he shows doubts. While everyone talks about achievements, he talks about risks. Because those who show weakness intentionally disarm, and those who disarm access. Walls fall not in the face of strength, but in the face of trust created with a gesture of manufactured humanity. Machiavelli knew that the world is governed by perceptions. Truth, irrelevant. What matters is what appears to be true. That's why he wouldn't mind appearing naive, or jaded, or average. Because when the world buys into that image, it moves freely. No one suspects the man who seems ordinary. No one attacks the man who seems out of the game. But that man has already won. Because real dominance happens while everyone still thinks he hasn't even started playing. And that brings us to the essence of the rule. The most dangerous enemy is the one you think doesn't exist. The most skillful manipulator is the one you call your friend. The real ruler is the one who never needed to take the throne. He just made it obsolete. He doesn't overthrow the king. He makes the king meaningless. And then when everyone else looks to him for leadership, he's already in the center, without ever having asked for the title. In an age where everyone wants to be the protagonist, Machiavelli would be the director. The camera wouldn't even film him, but each scene would have his touch, each movement, his signature. And when the story was over, everyone would realize that there was no script, only will disguised as chance. Nothing that happened was accidental. Nothing was impulse. It was all sculpted at the right time, in the right gesture, in the right silence. Now look at yourself. How many situations have you rushed into to show who you are? How many times has the anxiety of being accepted made you lose control of the moment? How many times have you reacted when you could have waited? How many opportunities have you blown just because you needed to be noticed before you were ready? This is the hardest pain to accept. You give yourself away when you talk too much. You weaken yourself when you try to prove yourself. And worst of all, you nullify yourself when you forget that silence can be a trap as lethal as any word. The rush to be understood destroys the chance of being respected. The desire to be loved kills the space of being feared. Machiavelli doesn't give us answers. He gives us mirrors. And in them we see how willing we are to sell ourselves for crumbs of approval, how desperate we are to be seen. And in that desperation, we become blind to those who truly see. Because only the invisible has lasting power. The visible wears out. The invisible takes hold. Because the real game doesn't happen in front of the audience. It happens behind the scenes. And the most dangerous player is the one no one notices. Until it's too late. The one who never has to go on stage because everyone who does is already saying the lines he wrote. And here is the final provocation of this first part. What if you stopped trying to win by playing other people's games? What if, from now on, you learned to turn yourself off in order to dominate? Because power is not given to those who speak the loudest, but to those who observe in silence and act when everyone else is distracted. The world does not belong to those who shine. It belongs to those who control the light switch. Those who shout need to be heard. Those who govern do not. And Machiavelli, even dead, still governs, not through books, but through those who have learned to listen to his absence, the absence that instructs, shapes, and transforms. In the next part, we will cross the boundary between image and essence. Because it is not enough to be invisible. You need to control what others see, even if they don't see you. Every empire begins with an image, not the real image, but the one that is projected. Machiavelli knew that the public eye does not seek the truth, but a comfortable version of reality. And whoever controls that version controls behavior. That is why he did not trust his essence. He trusted the appearance he chose to present. The world, he said, judges more with its eyes than with its mind. Imagine walking into a room where no one knows you. What you wear, how you move, what you say and what you don't say builds an image. But this image doesn't have to be true. It has to be effective. The mistake most people make is thinking they have to be authentic all the time. Machiavelli would smile when he heard this. He would say, "Be authentic in what you feel, but strategic in what you show." Because power is not gained through transparency, but through the impression you leave. Look at today's world. Everyone shares their moves. Every victory is showcased. Every plan is announced. Every failure is explained. But when everyone shows everything, they lose their advantage. The enemy who knows their route prepares the ambush. The competition who understands their method replicates or sabotages. And the public, fed up, begins to ignore. To expose is to become predictable. And the predictable is controllable. Machiavelli, observing this, would choose another path. He would show the surface but hide the structure. He would let people see the victories, but never the behind the scenes. He would tell the story after the end, when it would be impossible to interfere. He would not use the truth as a weapon. He would use illusion as a shield. And so, he would advance without opposition. And here he teaches a vital rule: control what they see, hide what you do. In a world that values exposure, those who dominate are those who know what to hide. Because what no one understands, no one can attack. A secret, when well kept, is a fortress. And when everyone thinks they know everything about you, your only advantage lies in what you have never let slip. Think about the times when someone said something about you that wasn't entirely true. You wanted to correct yourself, clarify, defend yourself. But sometimes, by explaining yourself too much, you only feed doubt. Machiavelli wouldn't explain. He would let the doubt grow. Because doubt is more powerful than certainty when well positioned. It generates curiosity. And the object of curiosity becomes unforgettable. See how this appears in everyday life. A professional who never shares his plans, but delivers solid results. He doesn't say what he's going to do, he just does it. And when the result appears, no one knows how he got there. This creates admiration. And admiration, when mixed with mystery, turns into silent respect. Now, think of the opposite. Someone who is always promising, explaining, posting every step. When he fails, everyone notices. When he repeats himself, everyone gets tired. Machiavelli preferred surprise, because surprise disarms. He would also teach, create a mask, an image of security, of control, of virtue. But don't keep that mask intact all the time. Let it crack in a calculated way. Show an apparent flaw, a carefully placed vulnerability, a slip that seems human but is rehearsed. Why? Because perfection is distant, but imperfection attracts. The occasional mistake brings people closer, and by revealing yourself partially, you capture their full attention. Imagine someone in a leadership position, always impeccable, always correct. He commands respect, but also distance, until the day when, faced with a crisis, he reveals an unexpected emotion, a contained anger, a look of frustration, a disconcerting silence. And suddenly, everyone realizes that there is something behind that image, something they didn't know. And now, they want to understand. The search for understanding turns into fascination, and fascination turns into loyalty. Machiavelli would say, show 90%, enough to appear transparent, but hide the rest, because people will fill that void with their imagination, and nothing holds them back more than a well-fed doubt. They will try to figure you out. They will observe your gestures, interpret your silences, analyze your patterns, and in the process, they will be under your control. Because while they are trying to understand you, they are distracted from themselves. This is true in relationships, in negotiations, in any power play. When you are totally accessible, you become common. When you are unpredictable, you become magnetic. And magnetism is effortless influence. Now look at how this works on social media. Someone posts about their daily routine. You know what they think, what they eat, where they go, who they're with. After a while, you lose interest. But someone who comes along every now and then with something powerful, who disappears for days, who never explains themselves, that person remains intriguing. They're not there all the time, but they're alive in your mind. Machiavelli knew this before technology even existed, because he understood that the human mind hasn't changed. The stage has changed. The audience has changed. But the desire to understand the incomprehensible remains the same. That's why he would teach you more, say less than necessary. Words have weight, but silence has direction. Speaking little is not being shy, it's being strategic. Every time you say less than expected, you force the other person to think more. And those who think more about you feel more for you. When everyone expects a long answer and you respond with one sentence, you change the pace of the conversation. You take control without having to impose yourself. Think of a common argument. Two people exchanging arguments, trying to win by volume, logic, charisma. And then one of them stops. He stays silent, looks into your eyes, smiles slightly, and says, "Do you really believe what you're saying?" The sentence is short, but the impact is devastating. Because it's not just the content, it's the cut, the pause, the contrast. Machiavelli would use this as a blade, not to hurt directly, but to cut through the other person's emotional stability. He knew that power lies in the gap between words, in what is not said, in what is merely suggested, and more than that, in what is interpreted without having been stated. Because what is said can be questioned, but what is felt is not discussed. So, by controlling what they show, by modulating the mask, by speaking less, Machiavelli's followers learn something rare. Real power is not what imposes itself. It is what infiltrates. It is not what impresses. It is what remains. It is not what shines. It is what settles. And here's the twist. All of this is not about manipulating others. It's about mastering yourself. Because the biggest trap is wanting to be loved by everyone. The biggest weakness is needing to be understood. The biggest prison is living in function of one spontaneous image. Machiavelli didn't want approval. He wanted structure. He wanted to win. And winning for him meant being the only one who didn't need to justify himself. Now look at your life. How many times have you said too much out of anxiety? How many times have you shown everything, afraid of appearing indifferent? How many times have you tried to prove your worth to people who weren't ready to see it? How many times have you given away your advantage just so you wouldn't seem enigmatic? The next time you feel like explaining, take a breath. The next time you want to show something, ask yourself, does this strengthen or weaken my position? The next time you are about to fill a silence, try leaving it there. Because sometimes it is in that emptiness that the other person reveals everything. Machiavelli is more alive than ever, not because he is remembered, but because his teachings continue to operate in the minds of those who do not need to prove anything. He invites us to abandon the theater of transparency, to embrace the power of selective presence, to dominate the stage without ever stepping on it. And that's why this part ends with silence, because everything that needed to be said is already taking effect, and everything that wasn't said is what will dominate you until the next part. The most effective manipulation is not done by force or logic. It is born from a sense of security. Machiavelli knew this better than anyone. True control begins when the other person believes they are in control, and that is exactly where everything changes. It is not about deceiving with words, but about leading with permissions. The most sophisticated power is that which does not seem like power. It is that which is established as trust, but operates as domination. Have you ever noticed how some people get everything they want without raising their voice? They don't impose. They make others offer. They are the ones who praise before criticizing, who listen before disagreeing, who seem to give in, but are, all the while, leading. This gentleness, this calm and attentive pace is a disguise. It is a strategy, and Machiavelli would use it as a weapon. He understood that a ruler's biggest mistake is not to be hated. It is to be predictable, because what can be anticipated can be neutralized. That is why he would encourage a constant paradox. Be trustworthy, but never completely. Be accessible, but with limits. Show support, but keep ulterior motives. The human mind surrenders to well-constructed contradiction. How many times have you trusted someone who gave you a compliment? And how many times have you realized afterward that there was a game going on? Something you didn't notice at first, but in retrospect was clear. You weren't deceived. You were led. And the difference between being deceived and being led is your level of involvement. The more you like it, the more you obey. Now imagine applying this consciously. Imagine using gentleness as a mask and observation as a weapon. Imagine allowing others to get close, but only as far as you define. Psychological control arises not from direct domination, but from the emotional dependence that grows in the other. And this dependence is built like someone building a bridge, stone by stone, gesture by gesture, until the other person depends on the crossing you have created. Have you ever wondered why some people seem irreplaceable? It's not because they're the best. It's because they've become necessary, and being needed is more powerful than being loved. Machiavelli knew this. He would teach, help, but help with a hidden price. Offer value, but not for free. Make the other person feel indebted, because invisible debt binds more than formal debt. This strategy applies to everything, in personal relationships, in the workplace, behind the scenes in politics. Those who create emotional dependence do not need to directly control. They just need to be absent at the right time. Strategic absence is a form of power. It exposes how much the other person needed you. And this impact is devastating, because it is not you who says it. It is the other person who feels it. Have you ever missed someone who never demanded your attention? Someone who seemed light, but whose absence weighed more heavily than you imagined? This is how need is shaped. Not by forcing it, but by constantly appearing and then disappearing at the right moment. Machiavelli would teach this precisely. Give what is necessary, then take it away, and watch the silent chaos that ensues. Silent chaos is more effective than open conflict. It eats away at you from within. It makes the other person's mind work against them. Imagine someone who is emotionally dependent on you but doesn't realize it. You walk away. You don't fight. You just keep quiet. This silence speaks louder than any accusation. It awakens insecurity, doubt, anxiety, and in the end, submission. But how do you create this dependence without appearing manipulative? This is where Machiavelli would show his genius. He didn't command, he allowed, he didn't demand, he sowed. He made people make decisions on their own, decisions that, mysteriously, always benefited him. He was the architect of disguised desires. Have you ever thought about how many decisions you've made in life thinking they were yours, but that were influenced by someone who knew exactly what you wanted to hear? What if, right now, some of your strongest convictions are just reflections of well-placed ideas? Doesn't that scare you or fascinate you? There is power in making others think they are free while acting according to their script. And this power is not mystical. It is technical. It is psychological. Machiavelli understood this when he studied human nature. Men obey those who confirm their vanities, not those who challenge their egos. So if you want to dominate, don't confront. Nurture. Tell the other person what they want to hear. Then, slowly, change the environment around you. Make yourself useful. Become the solution. And then, when they need you, you will be indispensable. Not by merit, by engineering. This is what emotional engineering is. Understanding that people don't obey ideas. They obey emotions. If you make someone feel special, valued, understood, that person will follow you, even without knowing why. And if one day you walk away, they will come running after you. But what if you are discovered? What if they see through your strategy? Machiavelli would smile and reply, "The secret is in the dosage. You never give everything away. You never fully reveal your intentions. You always maintain a layer of ambiguity. Because when people can't define you, they start to fear you. And subtle fear is a form of respect. Respect is not born of force. It is born of emotional control. And whoever masters the emotional, masters the game. You don't need to be smarter. You just need to be more patient. While others react, you observe. While they show themselves, you build. Watch any group long enough and you'll see patterns. Those who talk too much. Those who lead out of ego. Those who keep quiet out of insecurity. And at the center, there's always someone who understands all of these movements. Someone who doesn't need to be in charge to be in control. That's the kind of figure Machiavelli would be. And that's the kind of presence you can build. Now look at your life today. Are you reacting or leading? Are you over-explaining? Are you giving more of yourself than necessary? Are you trying to be accepted by those who don't even know their own worth? Every move you make reveals a pattern, and every pattern, a weakness. The question is, do you want to continue being predictable? What if, starting today, you decided to strategically disappear from some conversations? If you started talking less and observing more? If, instead of trying to convince, you let the other person reach their own conclusion? How would that change your position? Have you ever tried this intentional silence? Have you tried absence as a tool? Machiavelli's tools were not weapons. They were perceptions. He saw ahead. He thought 2 steps ahead. And most importantly, he never told everything he knew. Because knowledge revealed is power lost. The more you tell, the more they understand you. And the more they understand you, the less they fear you. It's not about hiding out of fear. It's about hiding out of strategy. If everyone knows what you want, how you think, how you react, they've already won. But if no one can predict your next move, you become inevitable. And the inevitable is what no one dares to confront. Have you ever wondered why the most impactful people you've ever met had an aura of mystery? It's not a coincidence. It's a construct. They don't reveal everything. They're not always available. They don't say yes so easily. And that's precisely why they remain unforgettable. Machiavelli would say, don't be too accessible. Be present enough to be desired, and absent enough to be needed. This dance between presence and absence, between giving and withdrawing, between praise and doubt, is the heart of psychological mastery. And psychological mastery is the new form of power. In a world where everyone wants attention, the one who commands is the one who can control the other's focus without having to ask. You control the focus when you are remembered even when you are absent. When your words echo even after you are gone. When your gesture, your look, or your silence remain alive in the memory of the other. This is the new territory of influence, and Machiavelli would be king in it. Because in the end, it's not about taking over the world. It's about taking over what's going on inside people. And that starts where few people look, in the way you show up, in how much you offer yourself, in how much you hold back, in the pace at which you appear and disappear. And all of this has a cost. Because maintaining this balance requires self-control. It requires patience. It requires that you endure the discomfort of not being understood, of not being applauded, of not being accepted. But in exchange, you gain something that few have: sovereignty. You don't have to be perfect. You have to be needed. You don't have to be loved. You have to be inevitable. And to do that, you have to start now, not tomorrow. Not after a course, a book, an external validation. Now, start observing. Start reducing. Start rebuilding your presence. And let this rebuilding be silent. Because every lasting empire is built in silence and is only revealed when no one else can stop it. Machiavelli knew this. Now you know it too. In the next part, we'll explore how power can be fragmented, diluted, and recomposed through fragile alliances. Because sometimes, to dominate an empire, all you need to do is put doubt in the minds of your allies, and then let them destroy themselves. The true collapse of a power structure rarely begins with a direct attack. It begins with a doubt. Machiavelli knew this. He didn't need armies. He needed loose phrases, rumors, small gestures that seemed innocent. Because he understood an uncomfortable truth. Human beings fear betrayal more than any external enemy. And so he planted betrayal like one would cultivate poison, in silence, with patience, knowing that when fear ripens, destruction is inevitable. Imagine a group united by purpose, a team, an alliance, a friendship. Everything seems solid until someone whispers, "Did you notice how he stopped defending you?" It's just a question. But it changes everything. The mind, once infected by suspicion, does not return to its previous state. It begins to reinterpret everything. What was neutral becomes threat. What was praise becomes manipulation. What was silence becomes judgment. And the group, which seemed cohesive, begins to fragment. Machiavelli would call this an invisible rupture. It cannot be seen from the outside, but it is there, corroding, weakening, slowly destroying the foundation that supported that relationship. He did not need to say, "Be suspicious." All he had to do was plant a scenario where distrust would flourish naturally. Because when fear is born from within, it cannot be fought with arguments. It grows like a weed, and the human mind, eager for coherence, begins to see evidence everywhere. Have you ever experienced this? Have you ever had a relationship, a partnership, or a friendship shaken not by something that actually happened, but by something you began to imagine? Do you remember the exact moment when you stopped trusting? No, because it wasn't stated, it was suggested. And that is the most powerful weapon. What is not said out loud, but resonates as truth. Machiavelli would exploit this masterfully. He would say, "If you want to destroy an alliance, don't attack the leader. Attack the trust between the followers. Make one believe the other is hiding something. Give them reasons to start looking away, to make gestures start being calculated, to make silence become noisy. And in time, you won't have to lift a finger. They will do the work for you." This type of collapse is common in companies, families, governments. All it takes is an emotional imbalance, an unresolved insecurity, a poorly made comparison, and the rest follows like dominoes. Collapse never starts at the top. It starts at the weakest link. And Machiavelli knew how to identify this link with surgical precision. There is a little-known psychological experiment from the 1970s that shows how trust can be destroyed in minutes. A group of people are gathered together and told to collaborate on a simple task. Without warning, an undercover actor begins asking subtle questions. Do you think everyone here has the same intentions? Doesn't it seem like some people are taking advantage of this? The result is always the same. Before long, the group stops collaborating. Small groups begin. Side conversations begin. A dispute over who is more right begins. The actor doesn't need to accuse anyone. He just needs to suggest that something is wrong. And doubt does the rest. Machiavelli would transform this experiment into a method. He would not seek confrontation. He would seek erosion. He would not declare war. He would declare unrest. Because discomfort is more dangerous than threat, it sets in without resistance. And when it is perceived, it is already too late. Now think about the great falls in history. How many were caused by direct battles? And how many began with rumors, internal betrayals, and pent-up resentments? The Roman Empire did not fall all at once. It was weakened by internal divisions. Julius Caesar was assassinated not by declared enemies, but by friends who had stopped trusting him. Napoleon fell because he trusted too much in alliances that could no longer support the weight of his ego. History is a graveyard of structures that collapsed from within. And here an uncomfortable question arises. In how many of your relationships are there fragile alliances? How many connections do you maintain only for appearances, but that could fall apart with a simple doubt? And more importantly, in how many of these relationships are you truly seen as indispensable? And in how many, just as useful? Machiavelli did not believe in eternal fidelity. He believed in circumstantial fidelity. People are loyal as long as it is convenient for them. When convenience changes, the discourse changes. And those who do not understand this are stabbed with the label of naive. That is why he taught, do not trust. Observe. Do not demand promises. Demand structure. And when necessary, destroy alliances from within. To do this, he used what we now call psychological mirroring. He would allow people to reveal their insecurities, their fears, their criticisms, without compromising themselves. He would be the neutral receiver, the silent ear, the unlikely confidant. And the more people talked, the more they would reveal where the points of tension were. Who is jealous of whom? Who feels wronged? Who wants to leave but doesn't have the courage? And with this information, He would initiate the controlled breakdown. Have you ever noticed that people talk more when you listen in silence? That they often reveal their secrets, not because they trust you, but because they need to ease their conscience? Machiavelli used this. He let others do the talking, and while everyone else tried to appear strong, he took note of their weaknesses. With these weaknesses mapped out, he acted like a sculptor. He didn't destroy all at once. He chiseled away slowly. A comparison here, a selective compliment there, a seemingly innocent comment. And the insecure, already unstable mind did the rest. Each person began to question the other's worth. And once this process began, it was almost impossible to reverse. Neuroscience studies show that trust, once broken, activates the same area of the brain as physical pain. This is not a metaphor. It is biology. Being betrayed or distrusting someone generates a real physiological reaction. And Machiavelli, even without the advances of modern science, knew this from observation. He knew that you don't have to hit to hurt. You just have to create an absence and let the other person feel the pain of uncertainty. He also understood the power of comparison. He would pit one ally against another with a simple gesture, discreetly valuing one and ignoring the other. Nothing explicit, just enough to create an asymmetry. Because when human beings feel less valued, they go into self-protection mode. They start to judge, criticize, and compete. And the alliance, which was once solid, turns into a fight for attention. Machiavelli would use envy as fuel. He wouldn't create it directly, but he would know where it already existed, and he would feed it. Because where there is envy, there is a crack, and where there is a crack, there is the possibility of collapse. He wouldn't push. He would make room for others to fall. Imagine a team where two members begin to silently compete for the leader's approval. Neither speaks out, but one begins to try harder. The other feels threatened. Little comments are made. The mood changes. Collaboration turns into sabotage. And before they know it, both are weakened. The true strategist watches this from afar. He doesn't interfere. He simply creates the environment in which this becomes possible. And here's the hard lesson. You don't have to destroy alliances to win them. You just have to provide a context in which they self-destruct. A scenario where ego speaks louder than purpose, where fear trumps loyalty, where silence becomes noise. Machiavelli didn't write rules of battle. He wrote implosion scenarios. Now think about your current relationships. Who around you is loyal out of conviction? Who is loyal out of convenience? Who would stick by your side even when the winds change? And most importantly, are you blinded by some false alliance? The first step to power is not to create followers. It is to dismantle resistance. And the greatest resistance does not come from outside. It comes from the illusion that we are surrounded by eternal allies. Machiavelli would destroy this illusion with a simple whisper. Are you sure you can trust them? In the next part, we will explore how the most loyal enemy can be conquered not by force, but by guilt. Because there is something stronger than loyalty, the shame of having betrayed someone who seemed to trust you. And this Machiavelli knew how to manipulate like few others. In a world where everyone rushes to speak, the one who dominates is the one who knows how to keep quiet. Machiavelli understood early on that silence is not absence. It is a tool. It is a tactic. It is provocation. Silence, when applied well, does not shut down the conversation. It changes the temperature of the room. It creates space. And in that space, the other person's mind begins to work against itself. Doubt, guilt, fear, anticipation. All of this grows in the vacuum of a response. People underestimate silence because they confuse noise with authority. They think they need to take a stand, respond, explain. They think that remaining silent is a sign of weakness, of surrender. Machiavelli would smile at this confusion, because he knew that the strongest word is the one that doesn't need to be said, and that the most threatening look is the one that doesn't blink. Imagine a meeting room. A conflict is brewing. Someone raises their voice. Another defends themselves. Arguments cross the table like arrows. And instead of reacting, you remain silent. Not out of indifference, but out of dominance. You observe, you calculate. You know that every word spoken in the heat of the moment is an open window. and you prefer to keep your doors closed. In that moment, you become the focus. Everyone wonders what you are thinking, what you are going to say, when you are going to act. And the truth is that you have already acted. By not speaking, you have already sown doubt. Have you ever noticed how people feel compelled to fill the silence? How they start justifying things that no one has asked, predicting arguments, confessing without having been accused? This happens because human beings are afraid of emptiness. And where there is fear, there is power. Machiavelli used this as a king who never needs to ascend the throne. He reigned by suggestion. Silence is provocation, but it is also protection. When you speak less, you offer less information. And information is ammunition. Machiavelli knew that most people sabotage themselves because they talk too much. They explain too much. They expose plans, emotions, intentions. And in doing so, they give up control. He preferred to let the other person reveal everything, because those who speak commit themselves. Those who listen choose the moment to intervene. There is a curious fact in business negotiations. Most deals are closed by those who speak the least, because those who speak the least listen the most, and those who listen the most understand the stakes better. If Machiavelli were at that table, he would not try to impress with pretty words. He would let the other person talk until they revealed their priorities, their weaknesses, their fears. And then with a simple phrase, he would seal the deal and leave everyone with the feeling that they were the ones who won. Have you ever been in a conversation where the other person suddenly went silent and it threw you off balance? Have you ever found yourself trying to guess what the other person is thinking just because they didn't respond? This discomfort is intentional. And whoever masters this effect, masters the other person's mind. Machiavelli did not need to raise his voice. His presence was enough, because he knew that true power is not what you impose. It is what is perceived even when it is not manifested. Absolute power is that which remains when the body has left the room, when the voice is no longer heard, but the idea is still present. This brings us to a second layer of silence. Absence with impact. It is not enough to be silent. Your silence must be felt. It must have weight. And this only happens when your presence has been built up with intensity beforehand. Machiavelli would teach that, in order to dominate in silence, you must first become a reference, a standard, someone who, even when absent, continues to be the yardstick by which everyone measures their actions. How do you build this? With consistency. With precision, with controlled presence. You don't show up all the time, but when you do, you make an impact. You don't have to talk for hours. You talk enough to make an impression, and then you step back. Let others digest. Let them analyze. Let them create theories. It's this movement, appearing with force and disappearing with strategy, that creates the ghost effect. You're not there, but you continue to influence decisions. This can be applied to any context. A leader who doesn't monitor all the time, but whose opinion shapes decisions even when he or she isn't present. A friendship that doesn't need daily messages, but that resonates when silence appears. A rival who, even outside the game, still dictates the rules because of everything he or she has already built. Have you ever thought about how many times you acted trying to predict the reaction of someone who was no longer around? How many times you tried to avoid a situation just because you remembered someone's silent judgment? This is invisible influence. It is the pinnacle of psychological power, and Machiavelli pursued exactly this. He believed that the most absolute control is that which occurs without resistance. When the other person acts as you would like, without you having to give them an order. When they feel that they are making decisions on their own, but the choice has already been conditioned. And for this, silence is more effective than any speech. But Machiavelli also knew that silence alone is not enough. It needs to be balanced with unpredictability. Because if you are always silent, you become static. And static, over time, becomes irrelevant. That is why he used the element of surprise. He spoke when no one expected it. He acted when everyone thought he was inert. And in this contrast, he created an impact. Have you ever been surprised by someone who, seemingly calm, reacted firmly at the right moment? This breaking of expectations reinforces respect. Machiavelli was not passive. He was patient. He knew that the most powerful action is the one that occurs when others are most distracted. And this action, when it comes from someone who rarely moves, seems even greater. There is a psychological phenomenon called the felt absence effect. It describes how the sudden withdrawal of a constant presence has more impact than its continued presence. Machiavelli used this. He would strategically withdraw, not out of pride, but to activate the other person's perception, to remind them that his presence was not guaranteed, and that without it, the world would look different. In relationships, this translates into perceived value. Someone who is always there becomes common. Someone who is always there becomes necessary. This is not a game. It is psychology. It is the way the brain responds to scarcity. When something is not always available, its value increases. And Machiavelli understood the human brain like few others. He didn't talk about love, he talked about power. But he knew that the fear of losing is a stronger force than the desire to gain. That's why he used absence as a silent threat. He didn't say he would leave. He just disappeared. And he let the other person feel the difference. This feeling creates loyalty. It creates submission. It creates emotional dependence. Have you ever walked away from someone and suddenly realized that they started looking for you more? Did you start to realize your value? This happens because absence clears the noise. It reveals what was being ignored. And what is rediscovered through absence is valued with intensity. Machiavelli did not believe in promises. He believed in structures. He did not want to be loved through words. He wanted to be needed through absence. And this need, when well constructed, transforms any relationship into silent dominion. You do not ask, you condition. You do not demand, you allow. He also taught, don't threaten. Let fear build naturally. Don't say you're going away. Start going. Don't say you know something. Let the other person realize that you know. What is unsaid is more powerful because it cannot be disputed. It has no form, and everything that has no form grows in the imagination. The imagination of others is the most fertile territory for control. When you plant a doubt, it multiplies. When you plant an absence, it becomes an amplified presence. When you plant an incomplete gesture, it becomes a narrative. And Machiavelli was a master of incompleteness. He never offered all the answers, just enough to make the other person's mind lose itself in attempts to understand. Now think, how many times have you tried to understand someone and, in that attempt, gotten more involved than you wanted? How many times have you stuck with someone who offered little but suggested a lot? This is technique. This is rhythm. This is emotional architecture. And you can learn to use it without losing your ethics. You just have to understand that influence is not about manipulation. It is about shaping contexts, and contexts shape decisions. Machiavelli invites us to a new kind of power, a power that does not need to be declared, that does not need to be defended, that does not need to be displayed, a power that reveals itself in silence, that imposes itself in absence, that asserts itself in the mind of others without needing their voice. This is real power, and it begins when you learn to keep quiet when everyone else is shouting. In the next part, you will understand how time, used with cruelty and precision, transforms any small offense into definitive destruction. Because Machiavelli did not retaliate in the heat of emotion. He waited, and then he made the other person wish he had never underestimated him. Everything that has been said so far may seem distant, cold, rational, Machiavellian. But now it's time to talk about what really matters, what you're going to do with it. Because knowledge without application is like a blunt blade. It seems dangerous, but it doesn't hurt. It seems useful, but it doesn't transform. True power is not in ideas, it's in those who have the courage to apply them. Machiavelli never wrote for the weak. He wrote for those who were willing to see the world as it is, not as they wish it to be. And that is the first step, accepting that the world is a field of influence, that behind every gesture there is an intention, that behind every compliment there may be a strategy, and that if you don't learn how to play the game, you will be just a pawn in someone else's game. But understanding is not enough. You have to act, and act consciously, with purpose, with structure. So, Let's talk about how to internalize everything you've learned and transform it into practical, daily, silent, but devastating action. The first step is to observe. Really, observe everything. The conversations around you, the behavior of those who try to please, the silences between sentences, the subtle changes in mood, the patterns of those who lead, the patterns of those who follow. Make your presence a radar. You don't need to interfere, you need to understand, because the one who understands first decides best. The second step is to slow down. Haste is the enemy of strategy. The world will push you to react, to explain yourself, to respond quickly. Resist it. Stay silent when you are pressured. Give short answers when they expect long explanations. Disappear for a few hours when they expect urgency. This discomfort you feel is the beginning of your emotional mastery. You are no longer predictable. The third step is to create absence, but not just any absence. A felt absence. An absence with value. This is only possible if you have built your presence beforehand. So every time you are present, deliver quality. Look people in the eye. Speak with precision. Make an impact. And then disappear for a while. Let them miss you. Let them notice the void. This reinforces your importance without you having to ask for it. The fourth step is to control the narrative. This doesn't mean lying. It means choosing what to show, what to say, when to say it. How people perceive you defines how they treat you. So stop trying to be understood by everyone. Choose which image you want to prevail, and feed that image with consistency. The world doesn't follow the most authentic. It follows the most coherent. The fifth step is to select your alliances with a cool head. Don't confuse kindness with loyalty. Don't confuse admiration with usefulness. Machiavelli taught us that alliances are useful as long as they are advantageous. Learn to read intentions. Learn to test people's consistency before opening up. And remember, you don't have to break up to protect yourself. Sometimes all you need to do is back off. Create distance. Let the other person reveal themselves in the void. The sixth step is to use silence as a weapon. Use it in discussions, in negotiations, in moments of tension. Learn not to fill in all the blanks, to leave sentences hanging, to respond with your gaze. Silence forces the other person to show more than they should, and in this excess of exposure, you will find exactly what you need to make a decision. The seventh step is to be unpredictable in decisive moments. Don't be constant all the time. Predictability is comfortable for those who want to manipulate you. So change the pace, surprise, break the pattern. Act unexpectedly, not on impulse, but on calculation. This builds respect, and respect is the cement of lasting power. And finally, the eighth step, create a legacy. Don't live just to win today, live to be remembered, so that your absence continues to influence decisions. This only happens when you shape the mindset of others, when your ideas become guides, when your presence leaves emotional, strategic, and intellectual marks. Maybe you're asking yourself now, can I really do all this? The answer is yes, but it will hurt, because it requires you to stop being liked all the time. It requires you to step out of the victim role. It requires you to abandon the comfortable innocence of someone who thinks the world is fair. It's not, and maybe it never will be. But that doesn't stop you from playing smart, ethically, cold-heartedly, yes, but also with heart. Because contrary to what many people think, Machiavelli did not preach evil. He preached clarity, lucidity, the courage to see others as they are, and not as we would like them to be. And this courage can, and should, be used to create more solid structures, more authentic relationships, more respected positions, more consistent results. This is the real transformation. To stop being driven by the anxiety of being accepted and start being guided by a greater purpose. To stop being emotionally reactive and start becoming emotionally strategic. To stop asking for space and start taking up space. Have you ever noticed that the great names in history didn't need to shout? That many were hated while they were alive, but became immortal because they knew where to put their energy. They chose to build, not to please, but to remain. And you can do the same. You don't need to be remembered by everyone. You just need to be unforgettable for those who really matter. So now that you know Machiavelli's 21 psychological rules for total control in today's world, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to let it pass as just another inspirational video? Or are you going to use every bit of this message to build something real, something invisible on the outside, but unbreakable on the inside? You can start small. Pick a rule, apply it, test it, observe it, feel the discomfort. Then pick another one. Do this for 30 days. You'll start to notice that people react differently, that you occupy a different place in spaces, that your mind works more clearly. You'll stop chasing respect, because it'll already be where you stand. If something touched you, confronted you, or awakened you, use it as an anchor, as a turning point, and share this journey with those who deserve to grow alongside you. Not with everyone, but with those who also have the courage to leave the bubble of passivity, who no longer want to ask permission to exist, who are ready to stop being predictable and become inevitable. Now, if you've come this far, it's because something inside you is ready. So, take action. And if you want to continue evolving with me, subscribe to the channel now. Deep Psyche, like this video so it reaches those who need to hear it. And if you want, leave your comment below. It can be your question, your experience, or even something anonymous. This space is also yours. The game has just begun, and now you are no longer a piece. You are the architect.